first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to make sure that when I got my first deal, I wasn't at risk of losing it. So I chose not to do a deal that would require leverage. So that was my criteria. I'm like, I'm going to do a deal that doesn't require leverage, something I can pay cash for and something I can learn,
You're listening to the AZREIA Show. If you're looking for quality real estate investing information that you can trust, you've found it. Stay tuned and join the tens of thousands of members that have already benefited from AZREIA, your home for education, market information, support, and networking opportunities that will advance your real estate investing career.
Welcome to another episode of the AZREIA Show. We're so excited that you are here today. For you all that are subscribers, continue to subscribe, continue to meet with us every week. And for those of you that have stumbled upon the channel, thank you for being here. I'm Marcus Maloney, your host, and this is Mike Del Prete.
Hello, hello.
And you are listening to the AZREIA Show. So today, as we get started, how's everybody's day going? How your day going, Mike?
It's good. It's always good. But if someone's listening to this, it's not going to be the same day.
But it's still a day.
Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. It's wonderful. I can't tell you.
All right. And Ben?
My day is going great. I first want to thank you both so much for having me on this episode. Can't tell you what an honor it is.
All right, great. So we have Ben Korn today, Benjamin Korn, and he's the Landman. We're going to be talking about land and land acquisitions and what to do with land and how you can repurpose land and everything like that. So if you guys are in the land space, right? Everybody needs dirt. If you're a builder or, if you got to excavate land for projects, things like that, you gotta have some dirt. So Ben, man, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So how did you initially get started? Kind of give us your quick backstory.
Yeah, absolutely. So just taking a quick step back to my professional career so people have a good idea of what I was doing before this so they know, that transition is possible. I used to be a first responder. I worked in fire and EMS for many years.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It was a great career. Ended the career as a paramedic, which was cool. During my time as a first responder, it was my first time living alone away from my parents, had my own finances, my own spot. And I didn't know anything about financial literacy, to be honest. And so I had two major goals when I started that job. Number one was to be a high functioning citizen and to do my job well. And the second was to just make sure I was taking care of myself. And one of the ways in which one takes care of themselves is finances. So of course I had to learn how to do that. In that process, I was very successful and thought that maybe I could use this information to help people as well. I noticed on a lot of 911 calls, a lot of people really struggle with that space. And if they had that financial control over their lives, I think it would have made a world of difference, just in some of the decisions, some of the options that they make. And so that is what challenged me to go on and become a financial advisor after that journey.
So you said something I never heard anyone say on the podcast, which is pretty cool. I want to be a high functioning citizen.
I did.
That's great, man. Where'd that come from?
I was like 22 years old and I was like, I don't want to go back to my parents with my tail between my legs. A little bit of that pride.
All right.
So that, to be honest with you, that's where it came from. But
that's a good statement, man. I love it.
Thank you.
You gonna tell your son that? Just be a high functioning citizen.
Yeah.
Don't come back here.
Yeah, he's in a couple months, right? No, I don't think he'll feel bad.
No,
I'm just joking.
That's funny. Go back to bed.
So being a paramedic, man, how did you get into that, right? Because that's a very rigorous field.
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I was in high school, I did some volunteer work for some local fire departments. And so I didn't know this then in the state of Arizona, the fire department trains and retains paramedics. And so that's how I first found out about that opportunity. That's where they come from. They're kind of not separate. And so during that journey, I worked really hard. It's something I knew I kind of wanted to do after I finished high school. And then a couple of years after working, I got the go-ahead from the fire chief I was working for at the time. And he was like, yeah, if you go to school, if you get yourself into school, we'll sponsor you here and we'll let you be a student at this department and, earn that credential. So,
well, it sounded like you was on a pretty good trajectory, right, in that field. And it was something that you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Why the shift to financial literacy?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's because during that journey, I really learned that there's so many ways to help. And that's really important to understand because you can be in that space and think, oh, well, this is, the the most godly best thing I can do for someone. But in fact, there's, you know, just solving a little part of someone's problem of their lives can have a huge impact. And so I found that finances was one of those things. And I didn't know about it because I never had that myself, kind of jazz. So, you know, again, going through that process and learning that, I just found how impactful it was. And, you know, again, I thought, hey, maybe there's a chance to help people in this space as well.
Okay.
So,
And what did you do? What did you do in that space?
yeah, that's a good question. So I worked for Vanguard, and they trained me. They got me my Series 66 and my Series 7. Those are the licenses that allow you to give financial advice. Worked on the sales team there. After that, went over to Merrill Lynch and worked there for a while, kind of doing a similar role, giving financial advice, helping people decide what their next best steps were, until I decided to take the jump and do real estate.
So did you notice while you're working with like successful clients, real estate was part of their life? Or,
Yeah.
Or is that kind of what got you to this world? Or
So that's actually how I first heard about real estate investing and that opportunity. I noticed that there was a fair amount of people who were very successful in real estate, and who were able to kind of live their best lives, you know, using that. And it makes sense, right? You think about it, right? Like, yeah, there's cycles in the real estate market, but there's always demand for the product. And that's really important to understand, because unlike other businesses where things may or may not be in style, real estate's always in style. Like I always say, like a 40-acre parcel, a rural 40-acre parcel, it's like a fine fur coat. It's never going out of style. It's always desirable. It's always luxurious.
wow,
So
true. That's a great perspective. Never thought of it that way.
fine fur coat.
Yeah.
Where'd you come up with that one?
it just, like, I was looking at this 40-acre parcel in Cochise County that I didn't end up purchasing. I'm kicking myself in the butt over it. But it was a while ago, and I didn't have the experience to handle a development project like that. But I looked at that thing, and like you just kind of get this feeling. It's like that is just a fine luxury item. Like that's what I think about. It's like if I walked into Fashion Square Mall, an expensive mall, I would expect to see someone dealing land. You know, buying pieces of land. That's kind of what it feels like, right? For you get that tingle sensation, like anything's possible. So.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, so a 40-acre parcel, call Ben.
Please, please.
So, okay, so real estate, you got, the bug a little bit, right? You saw your clients doing it. So what was the next step you took? What happened?
Yeah, so I didn't know anything about real estate, so I actually Googled local real estate meetups, and AZREIA was one of the things that popped up. So you guys were my first exposure to true real estate investing outside of just, Googling on the internet. And, I got to say, YouTube videos are great. There's a lot of information, but a big problem is that information isn't tailored, and it's usually centered around the experience that YouTuber has had. So the likelihood it's specific to your situation is probably very low. So you guys were great, because when I came here, I was able to talk to people about, this is my situation, this is what I'm trying to do, what steps can I take to get there, and it's a lot more tailored. So for those of you out there who haven't been to an AZREIA meeting, definitely get here. You'll learn a lot.
Awesome, man. Yeah. So what happened? So you Google it, you came to a meeting, and tell us lead us up to your first deal. Yeah,
absolutely. So when I came here, first of all, I was floored about how many things you could do in real estate. I didn't know what wholesaling was. The buy and hold where you rent it out, it sounds kind of intuitive, but it can be a little bit intimidating, right? Yeah. You got someone living in a house you own, they're subject to fair housing law. There's so many things that you haven't considered. So I knew that the first step was the knowledge. The other thing I figured out was that a lot of good real estate is very expensive. And at the time, I didn't necessarily have the money for a big deal. So I was like, my situation is I don't know a lot, and I don't know where my niche is, if that makes sense. Yeah. So the first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to make sure that when I got my first deal, I wasn't at risk of losing it. So I chose not to do a deal that would require leverage. So that was my criteria. I'm like, I'm going to do a deal that doesn't require leverage, something I can pay cash for, and something I can learn, those mistakes along the way. And so that's how I ended up around land. I noticed that when I looked at rural pieces of raw land, that those are the more affordable side of real estate. Those are your deals that are, you can find all day long for $5,000 or less, right? The flip side of the coin, though, is it takes a little bit more time to dispose of those deals, right? So the disposition can be a little bit tougher, but I found, and we can go into this later, that with proper advertising, it's pretty quite simple. So, I settled on land. I was intimidated, calling realtors and making offers and being like, hey, will you take this is all I got in my account. Will you take it for half off? And of course the answer is no. So that's when I discovered foreclosure sales. Okay. And so just to be clear, foreclosure sales can happen with any type of property, but I just choose to focus on the raw land when I do see foreclosure sales. So if there's a foreclosure sale around a house, I'm probably not going to attend. Right? Okay. So
the idea here, we're not talking about infill lots, like in the neighborhood, a little piece of 10,000 square foot parcel. we're talking about on the outskirts of town.
Right.
That's
Correct.
where the world you went into.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm talking more specifically somewhere between 1 and 3 hours drive outside of a major city.
Okay.
And the reason for that is the space out there is a little bit less competitive. You know, you try to play ball in Maricopa County and you're going to be playing with the big dogs off. And as a new guy, that's really hard to break into. And I found that out very quickly and chose to focus in the more rural space.
Okay. Perfect. Back to foreclosure.
Yeah, so the way you find foreclosures is through public notice. So, you know, you check newspapers and it'll usually have something about a foreclosure sale if one is present. Different counties do it differently, not only in Arizona, but all over the U.S. Some counties, they'll sell a property as they get it. And different counties, they may sell it once a year. They'll have a once-a-year sale. So everything they foreclose on, and then they'll go ahead and dispose of that.
What's it like in Arizona? Are all the counties the same?
No. So like in Cochise County, in Coconino County, they will sell land as they get it or foreclosure property as they get it. But like La Paz County does it once a year.
God.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Now, break down the foreclosure, because when we think foreclosure in a single family world, it's like, okay, the bank lets someone borrow money,
Right.
and they're not paying their mortgage anymore. So,
Right.
is it similar in land, or what's going on here?
the answer is it can be. More commonly, we see that someone didn't pay their property taxes, and as a result, the county is going to foreclose on that land, and they are going to try to recover the taxes that weren't paid. Because
We're talking like a few $100.
no, not necessarily. I've seen properties in some rural areas that are just in nice golf course neighborhoods, and the foreclosure is like 15, 20,000. So it can be expensive.
So are taxes like really, well, you know, in like my tax is Central Phoenix, maybe like $2,000 a year.
Right.
Property tax, like what's it like in rural areas? Like what's the average property taxes?
Yeah, it's a good question. So you're looking at somewhere between $50 and $100, but the kicker is that by the time the county forecloses and offers for sale, you're paying interest, you're paying the district attorney fees from when they foreclosed, and so those things can really add up.
Is it like here in Phoenix, like 3 years or something, right? You could start the foreclosures different with land.
Yeah, so usually counties don't like to foreclose. It's a bad situation for everyone, right?
Yeah.
They have to be the bad guys, so on and so forth. So usually after 7 years is kind of that sweet spot. Now it doesn't always happen. A county can look at a piece of land and say, forget it. We're not going through the trouble. But typically the rule of thumb is somewhere around 7 years that's been sitting with unpaid taxes.
So what are some of the reasons why, or some of the reasons that you see where not homeowners, but landowners just don't pay those taxes? They just forget, or it got passed down to an inheritance?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's two major things, and both of these deals have to be approached differently. Number one is that the previous owner is deceased, and their kids may actually be paying the taxes, but they never changed the title to get themselves on it. So what they're doing is they're paying the taxes thinking they own the property and that it was magically inherited, but the chain of title was never amended. So the decedent owner is still the current owner on paper. The county recorder doesn't know that, so-and-so is deceased. They just record papers as they get them. So they're not necessarily being proactive and saying, hey, Joe Schmo is passed. I'm reaching out to the heirs to make sure that we get proper documentation. The second is when a developer buys a piece of land, usually subdivides, and then realizes there's some hindrance in the process of being able to complete a commercial subdivision. That could be inadequate water. That could be that the water's contaminated. And so what happens is you have a subdivider that's like, or a developer that's like, I can't do what I thought I was going to do. This deal's falling apart, and they're just insolvent. They simply don't have the money for the taxes.
And is there usually a bank involved on a developer land?
It's usually private money.
Private money.
I mean, it can be.
Okay.
It can be a bank. A lot of the rural areas, I'm actually not sure about who would finance that, right? Like an infill lot, you could probably get a major bank to do that all day long, right? But like more in the rural areas, I've usually seen more of like a private party lending.
That's pretty cool. Like I don't know if we talked about this in the Path of Progress episode. Because you said I had a friend years ago. I think I always bring up the story, the Buckeye story.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, he was like, hey man, this developer started this development and realized he couldn't get water from the city, right? And but that was like 5-6 years prior, and he's like, we're connecting water right past this land now. And this guy told me that. I was like, oh shoot! Like it makes you think like things change, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Opportunities could happen. Interesting. So all right.
So go.
Yes, and so then just to finish answering the question, how did I find this first property is, so I had the criteria of I need to pay cash for it. You know, and so when I was looking around, I was looking at some of the foreclosure deals, reading some of the newspapers, and I saw this one piece of land that was going for $2,700 that had not received a bid. This particular auction was a multi-day bid process, and so they had it open for like a week. And so basically, so you submitted your bid online, and whoever is, you know, bidding the most at the end of the week, that's who wins the property, right? So it was late in the week. I saw that this land had not received a bid, and I didn't know why, right? So it was good for me because I could take my time. There was no action around it. Right. So that's when I was talking to a couple of people at AZREIA, like, you know, what should I look for, so on and so forth. So the land, they were asking $2,700. Some of the due diligence that I did, that I learned just through talking with people, is like, I looked at the county assessor's office. Through that, I can tell, is there any improvements to the land? How is it zoned? What's the size? What are the taxes? I called the code enforcement. Hey, is there any, is there any liens or anything going on? I checked the chain of title to see who the previous owner was and to see if there was any mortgages or child support or something on there. And then what else did I do? I checked topography. I checked flood zone. So like I had a good idea of what this land could be used for before I went out and bought it. Last step was I drove all the way out to the property. It was about 2.5 hours-ish away from my house. It was a 2-acre parcel. You know, it was classic 9 a.m., 100 degrees out in Arizona when I went to see the thing. It was kind of on a primitive road, which means it's maintained by the county, but it's still legal access, right? So it has that right-of-way access. So, guys, you always got to go see that land before you buy it. There could be trash. It could be contaminated, so on and so forth. You don't know to get eyes on it, especially if it's in your own backyard, pro tip. So I'm out there, and the land is oddly shaped, which is probably why it wasn't getting as much attention. Part of the land was backed by a mountain. And so you kind of lose this natural space, because if you want to do anything to it, you got to dig out the side of the mountain. But right. I had a few things going for me. Number one, the neighbor had already done it on like 2 or 3 sides. So there was activity in this neighborhood. So I knew that the narrative was already set. I'm like, it's going to be residential, right? And when I was looking at the unique structure, there was kind of this half pipe shaped part of the property where there was kind of this mountain on one side and sort of this half mountain on the other. And I was like, someone put it right there, because it's ultimate privacy or something, right? It's ultimate privacy. You're going to get all the shade you need. And when you want to sit up on that mountaintop and have a cup of coffee and enjoy the panoramic view, you're going to be able to. So, of course, I was still a little bit nervous. I'm like, I don't know what I don't know. But the thing that really changed my mind is that when I was on the property, the neighbor's dog ran over and escaped from the yard, ran over to come and greet me. This was like a big old dog. It was probably 80 or 90 pounds. It's running over to me. And the first thing I noticed is that this dog isn't wearing shoes. So it's tougher than me, right? Like the ground, it's classic Arizona desert. Like there's rocks, there's cactuses everywhere. This dog's not wearing shoes.
Those booties?
No booties on this dog. This dog is approaching me real fast. I'm like, oh my God, right?
It's a tough dog. It doesn't have booties on it. Are we there?
We're there, man. But the dog came up to me, sat down, gave me a bunch of sniffs, let me pat its head. I'm like, if this dog is cool, that neighbor's probably cool, and someone's probably going to want to live here. So I ended up putting in the bid for $2,700. I got it. I consulted with a realtor who kind of believed in my mission. Did you, let me stop you for 1 second. Did you get a chance to talk to the neighbor? I did not. Okay. I did not his car was not there. Otherwise, I would have gone and knocked on the door. This was actually my second time at the property. The first time I just drove around the whole neighborhood. There were multiple parcels for sale in the neighborhood. I didn't know which I wanted. And then when I decided to focus on this one, I drove it a second time, and that's when I met the dog.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's all right. So then, I was able to partner with a realtor who really believed in the mission. This guy is super cool. He's selling homes that are multi-millions of dollars. He does the Troon area in Scottsdale, but I met him through a friend, and I was like, I know this is small potatoes for you, but this is what I'm trying to do, and these are the issues I'm trying to tackle. Will you list it for me? And he said, yeah. So put it up for $15,000, got an offer every.
So what county was this in, or where was this at?
This is in Graham County. So this is near Safford.
Oh, well, all the way over.
All the way over there, sir.
And so how did you determine the $15,000 price?
Comps. And so it was tricky because sometimes land can be a thinly traded security. And what that means is there's not a lot of sales data. Yeah. So I actually took sales data from the neighborhood next door because the people who were living there had been living there for like 20, 30 years and there wasn't a lot of movement, which is good. That means people are going to this area and that they're sticking around, right? So put it up for $15,000, got an offer every month until someone actually had the money to pay me. It was interesting when, people come up with proof of funds and no one had the 15, but my realtor got a phone call for a guy that was like, hey, this guy is willing to offer you 10. And at the time I was like, I still need to complete this transaction. During the foreclosure process, there's some things that can make selling the land difficult. We can go into this if you want, we can save it for another time, but it's a little bit about the concept of chain of title in real estate. So when real estate gets foreclosed on, it's what they call clouds, the chain of title. In real estate, there's a difference between possession and ownership. There we go. And so the difference between possession and ownership is that you can have a deed to a property, or you can be in a property, like you can be a renter, but you may not own that land.
Right.
And so the big issue, without getting too much in the technicalities, is that when land gets foreclosed on, there is a chance that all previous parties were not notified properly of the foreclosure. And if that's the case, then the foreclosure process is void, and that previous party or their heirs do have rights to that property.
Awesome.
So
Okay.
So you listed this without closing yet? Or what? I mean, you said you got an offer, but you had to clean up some things.
No. So I purchased it. So I had the deed. I received a treasury deed. So I am now in the chain of title. I now have the right of transferring this property, right? The 5 bundle of rights when you real estate. And so I put it up for $15,000, and then people started offering me that. But when it came time for those buyers to show proof of funds, no one had the money.
Okay.
And then I got a call from my realtor about 6 months later. He's like, hey, this guy wants to give you $10,000. He sent me over proof of funds. And at that time I was like, I could negotiate and I could probably get another $1,000, but I'm like, my real concern is making sure that this thing closes so I can make sure this is a repeatable process. So I was more after the knowledge than I was the extra dollar. So, took it to the title company. They worked their magic, everything worked out, ended up closing like 3 weeks later.
Did you use a title company in that county, or did you do it from here?
No, I used a title company that my realtor recommended.
Got it.
Okay.
So you made a few bucks.
Yes, sir.
A few grand.
Yes, sir.
That's awesome, man.
Well, one of the main things here, right, is that you didn't know what you didn't know, but you still took action, right? You still decided, hey, this is 2.5 hours away. I don't know much about dirt. I don't know much about carving out the side of a mountain, anything like that. Chain of title, but I'm still going to try to figure it out and go through the process.
Yeah.
And going through the process sound like you learned a lot.
Absolutely. And part of the key there was making sure that I was able to handle that property long term, because if I was, at risk of losing that property 3 months after I got it, for whatever reason, maybe I borrowed money, the deal fell through, I wasn't able to pay it back. Holding on to that property for a while gave me the chance to really become intimately familiar with it and learn about it and learn about that process, right? So I would say for that first deal, or if you're still a little bit not sure what you're doing, make sure that you can control that deal, whatever that looks like to you. Make sure that you're in control of that deal, because that's how you're going to learn, and that's how you're going to come back even more dangerous the next time.
Did you ask the agent or the buyer's agent what was the end scope of work that they were going to do with their property?
So yes. So interestingly, when they ended up signing the contract, I didn't ask this question until after the contract was signed. I was too focused on that. They're like, hey, that spot in between the mountain? I'm like, yeah. They're like, we're going to park an RV there. It's going to be our little getaway spot. And I was like, obviously. So I followed up with them. One thing I do as well is I check well permits to see the water situation going along, some real great public data. And I saw that their permit for their well got approved a couple of months ago. So they're moving forward. And, in the next couple of months, I might actually drive by and wave hi and see what's going on. So next time.
So are you strictly focused just on the foreclosures, or do you, because I know in that land world, a lot of people like to do the carrybacks, or structure a carryback with the homeowner or landowner and buy it that way. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a great question. So whatever works for the deal, you should do, right? Because each deal is very situational. In terms of the foreclosure, I still focus on that, but I do traditional acquisition methods as well. So I do a direct marketing campaign. It's actually been turning out pretty decent. I just started a few months ago. For those of you that haven't done it, it takes time. Like, you're going to send 6 months worth of letters, and that's when your pipeline is going to kind of start to build. That's what happened with me. I had a lady write me back, and she lives out of state, and she's like, yeah, I got, I inherited it. She only asked me $6,000. It's worth about $15,000. Right. But for her to hire a realtor, she's out of state, pay that realtor commission, have it sit. You know what I'm saying? I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to do that deal yet, because through my due diligence, I found that the property next door has some major code violations with some dilapidated dilapidated trailer on a property. And so like you got to be careful, because if that property next door, there's trash or there's rats or something, like that's a hazard, to that land. So, even though it's a sweet deal on paper, doing the due diligence, may have really saved me there. So
What happened next?
Yeah, so I still do like the tax foreclosures. I think that it's a good opportunity because there's a lot of work involved, and people sometimes don't like to face that work. So it's almost a barrier of entry, right? Also, land can sit. It's like my fastest contract from the time that I purchased the land, took out an offer, was 12 hours. My longest one was 6 months. So it's like, sometimes it can take a while. Some people aren't okay with that. But the tax sales, they can be very powerful because, for example, through the due diligence I've been doing, I've found a couple more deals that are kind of unseen. So like, for example, I found one where a developer had defaulted. And so now I have a chance to purchase 32% of a subdivision. Everything's been done. It's already been subdivided. Narrative's been set, right? There's people already in there. And so it's like, well, what is it going to take to make that property more valuable? How much is it going to cost? What percent do I really want to own? What can be done with multiple parcels?
Explain the 32% though. Like, why is it 32%?
That's just what the default was. There's 90 parcels in the entire acre, and 29 are for sale. Through tax default. So that's the opportunity, and that's just one. Another one I came across is there was a 0.3 acre parcel in eastern Arizona, kind of the same area. And so when I did my research, I found out that the county actually owns a 10th acre parcel that's adjacent to it, and there's a well on that property. The kicker is that the well hasn't been functional, or hasn't been in use, I should say, for like 30 or 40 years. So when I called the county, first I tried to buy that 10th acre parcel and combine that together and make a bigger deal. And they're like, well, we got to go down. We got to check out what's going on with the well. So they sent down the engineer. They're going to test the water. And so it's going to turn out that if they no longer need the well and they're going to decommission it, this subdivision, by the way, already has city water extended to it. Everyone's on city water, right? So it's like the only thing that it would require is this property needs to have a septic tank. The sewer line is just a little bit too far. You'd have to cross some properties. It'd be a nightmare. And so if it turns out that the well is no longer in service and decommissioned, well, now I don't have to follow the ordinance where I have to have a septic tank at least 100 feet away from an active well, right? That buys me more space in that property. Now that makes that deal more viable.
So, okay, talk about viable. Break down the fundamentals of when you're looking at land, because there's just the raw land.
Yeah.
Then there's, you have all these additions and permits or things you can do to make it better. So kind of break all that down.
Yeah, that's a good question. So regardless of how I acquire the land, whether it's through tax sale or through traditional means, the process is pretty much the same. I try not to get too caught up in comps, and here's the reason why. Because what you can put on the land may make that property way more valuable than what fair market value is currently dictating, right? If I take a piece of land and put a golf course on it, I may be willing to overpay whatever, right? So first, I take a look at what can the property be used for, and what does it have the potential to get rezoned. Those are my two major questions, and then I'm going to look at the narrative of the neighborhood. What's going on? Is something like this feasible? One thing about raw land, I don't mean to digress, but one quick thing about raw land is that people think that just because they're not making any more land, that all land is inherently valuable, and I'm here to tell you it's not. If you can't do anything to a piece of land for whatever reason, it caps the market value of that land.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I see what can be done with it. I check out to see if it's in a flood zone as one of my other major things. Not only is it in a flood zone, but is there a natural wash? And because I looked in, so when I looked at this neighborhood where I have the option to purchase up to these 29 properties, it's in a flood zone, which I learned how to work around that, right? So that's just another, problem solved, which is great. But it's in a flood zone, and that's not inherently a problem. And it's nice in this one case because there's this natural wash where it looks like when the water's draining, it's draining to this one lot because there's so much shrubs on it, right? It's totally green, and everything else is just dirt. So it appears that when it rains, it's kind of all being shuttled away.
Right.
And so that's just a huge advantage when you can identify things like that. So I checked out, I make sure it's not in a super fund. That's an area designated by the EPA where there's contamination. If you buy a piece of property that's contaminated, you are responsible for cleaning it up.
Yeah.
So be careful out there, guys.
So how do you test that, or how do you determine?
So you check online if it is on FEMA, and so you'll go to FEMA's website. They'll have a super fun link, But another good way to tell is that look around. Is there a factory around? Is there a flood zone where water is draining from the factory onto your land, right? That's how you get things like arsenic, right? And other things, other dangerous chemicals. So you check that, topography, and then I always go out and see the property is my last step. So you can collect a soil sample, you can do a perk test where you dig a hole and dump in water and see how fast the water drains. And that's going to give you not a definitive idea. You'll still need an engineer to help with the build process, but to give you an idea of, maybe where's the water table at? How stable is the soil? Wow. So those are the extents that I go to for these kind of smaller deals, quote unquote. But I got to say, that's the hard work it takes to really succeed, because when you buy and then you pray it's useful, I mean, you're going to lose every time.
Yeah.
So.
And I know knowing that zoning is very, very important, because like you said, if you know the zoning or what it could be zoned to, that can increase the value of that dirt.
Yes, absolutely.
So what's next? So what are you doing after that? Like, what are the other things? Like, so we mentioned earlier, you're talking about someone was landlocked. We talked about, you split the lots. You got to seek the well, septic. What's the process you go through to evaluate all that?
To evaluate the due diligence? Yeah, that's a good question. So there's two major things that you can do. The first thing you can do is you can look at county ordinance online. You can go on, zoning and planning. It's that 500-page document that you can Control F and find exactly what you're looking for. That's going to give you a really good baseline understanding of what's possible. So, for example, it's going to lay out what are the rules around a septic tank in that county. Like, how big does a lot have to be to accommodate both a septic and a well if you're that rural and you need one, right? In Graham County, it's at least 1 acre. So, right, so if you're out there and you get that less 1 acre and you need both those utilities, I mean, you're kind of SOL. And then it's calling the county and confirming kind of what you're saying. I had an incident where I called the county and everything looked good online, but it turns out this subdivision, they were halting giving out permits because the person who subdivided it, they ran out of money, but they never extended the road. They never extended utilities to this area. So even though it was zoned single family residential and it was on paper, it was ready to build, but when you call the county, they're like, yeah, we're not going to give a permit on that.
So, do you have a due diligence checklist?
I do. So I use ChatGPT to store all the information. So when I'm doing a deal, I'm getting the information, I'm putting in a ChatGPT, which is great because like I'll get emails back from county officials, people on the zoning board, XYZ. I put all that, in ChatGPT so it can help keep track of.
In my GPTs?
Yeah.
So, okay. So you're building out your own knowledge base.
Yes. Yes.
So you're saying you have all the communications you receive through all types of deals you're saving in here?
Yes. And the reason why is because when I forget something, I can just say, hey, what was the restriction around power? Does it have to be underground or does it have to be overhead? So whatever it is, so on and so forth. And so now that I've been kind of doing this, I get approached probably 3 or 4 times a week with a deal. And if I don't have everything organized, you're gonna miss something. And the devils are really in the details, because you got to remember, once that contract is signed and you're on the chain of title, it is your problem. I mean, you could sue for non-disclosure, so on and so forth. It doesn't matter. It's your problem, and you're going to be the one taking care of it when it's all said and done.
Wow. So you're doing all of this, right? You're learning this land and land acquisitions. What is your ultimate goal? What is this leading to?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think that when you think about land, I think the ultimate end game is kind of always development. And so you kind of say that all roads lead to hard money lending. So when you're dealing with land, kind of all roads lead to development. And what that is that's the process of taking that land, getting the permits, making it useful for something, and either choosing to build what that permit allows or selling that land with those permits to allow that next person to do it. And that's kind of the next step, because, I can get really good at acquisitions all day long, but that really, the development really completes the puzzle. That now the whole picture fits. Now it's like, now I can go and I can get that cheap property for a couple grand. I can fix that title. I can get that permitting done. I can market it to the correct party, and I can really make that huge spread. But it's hard. It might take years. I have mentors that have been sitting on deals for 10, 12 years because they knew eventually it was going to be good, but things just weren't there yet to where it made sense to actually go on and develop something. So
does that will that bring you back into the city then over time?
That's a good question. I I mean, if I had $1 million to spend on a Scottsdale infield lot, I'd probably do. But between you and me. But the good news is that these smaller deals, you're going to face the same issues as the big deals. So when I mess up on my $3,000 property, it's right, and the issue is going to be the same thing on that $1 million property. You're going to be dealing with the same issues.
You have it all in your chat GPT.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Amazing.
Yeah, cut your teeth on the little deals. If you lose some money, I'd rather lose $3,000 versus $1 million.
Absolutely. And real estate is so forgiving with time. When you're I got one last thing I got to comment is that when you're in that position where you can hold on to that deal, as long as the due diligence was done, like, things will work out, So
and do you foresee with the market being slower, mainly like in the residential and everything, is that affecting the land in any way?
Oh, that's a great question. So here's the answer. The answer is that when your deal is good, people will find you. And I found that to be true consistently. So when I make sure that things can be used for what I say they can be used for, and that, everything is in place when you go to make that sale and all the mechanisms are in place so that next party can do what they want with that land, it's going to sell all day long, man. Someone's going to come up with the money, because a juicy deal is a juicy deal.
So someone, an AZREIA member listening, so a little context here. Ben started, 2 years ago you joined?
Yes, about 2.5 years ago.
Okay. And a couple months ago, we gave him recognition at the monthly meeting for Member Spotlight. And this is kind of like a Member Spotlight as well. And I even like a couple months ago, you were just like, when I get more knowledge or more experience, I want to teach something, or you know what I mean? I want to help some people. And man, he blew that. Like, I'm like, no, man, just hop on here, dude. You already know enough, right? How do you feel now? Like, could you teach this?
So the answer is yes. And the answer is yes. I got to say, a lot of this is very psychological. So it's so intimidating. I got to say, like, you can't underestimate how intimidating it is to sit there with that first deal as a new investor, even when you know that you can afford it, even when you know if it goes sideways, you're going to be fine. It's still very intimidating. Getting over that mental barrier I truly think is half the battle.
Yeah, so if you like what Ben's saying, you want a land class, maybe we'll put him on the spot here, and you want access to his brain and his chat GPT.
Yeah.
Man, that's amazing. Good for you, Ben, man. So someone new that's like been curious about land, and give me one steps 1, 2, and 3, something maybe they can go out and do to get started.
Yeah, I think that something that's so powerful is starting with checking out your city and ordinance zoning laws in your town, and then paying attention to them as you drive around. So when you see an area that's commercially zoned and you're driving down and you see that quick trip in that commercial zoning, then the picture really starts to connect, because then you can connect the dots between, hey, this is what they said could be allowed and this is what appeared. And then once you kind of understand sort of that tempo, that cadence, right, of how things kind of shape and evolve, then you can go out where there's nothing and really imagine, like, hey, this, piece of land is close to this highway, a gas station would be great, or, this is the next subdivision, so on and so forth. The second thing that I would do is I'd look at historical sales data of different areas, and I would get a good idea of kind of what things are going for. And again, you got to be super careful, because with land, the slightest difference in location can change a lot. So for example, I was looking at a deal a few days ago where the person was asking me for $800,000. And I was like, why do you think this land is worth $800,000? I'm not seeing comparable sales. They're like, you can do this, that, and the other. And when you look really closely, it was close to the area they were talking about, but it was one street behind the main road. And of course, when you look at the map closer, extending utilities to that main road, or just having a construction crew cross this main road to get to where this lot is, would have been an absolute nightmare, just because of the condition that the land was in. So it's like, and so when you pay that premium price for that, it's not that if you built the houses, it wouldn't be worth the money. It's that, well, what about all the prep work? You gotta grade it. I gotta have a road extended. It's got to be a certain kind of road. It can't just be like there's like a road where you can just like spray it down. It's like a spray. It can't be that. And before a construction crew can even step foot, there's $100,000-$200,000 of work that needs to be done. So it's like, if you don't pick up on those nuances, that's when you're really going to be stuck, because you're going to be stuck wholesaling that deal, because you're not going to be able to handle what comes out.
It's funny, and it's amazing that you bring that up, because when I was doing some land deals not too long ago, one of the things that I was looking at an infill lot for a gas station. And I was just talking to one of the sellers, and he was selling me on it like it's perfect, everything like that. And then when I started talking to somebody that had a little bit more knowledge base than I did, he said, it's not going to be great because this lot is going away from the expressway. If you want to pull on the gas station, you want people that's going en route to the expressway. And I thought about that actually this morning. I was like, man, you know what? It would be great to have a gas station right here as I get ready to get on this expressway. And that made me think about it. You know, that, like you said, that is the difference between, hey, having an infill lot, you know, on the north side of the street versus the south side of the street, you know, because of the flow of traffic. So small little things like that you bring up, that's definitely true.
Absolutely. Yeah, these sellers they'll sell you their house.
Yeah, he had me sold too.
They'll do their best.
The worst, just to piggyback off that, the worst part about land is that once you're stuck with a bad land deal, that's it. It's not like you get a fix and flip where maybe you're coming in over budget, but the deal can still be saved. If you're up against a corner in a land deal, that is your corner, and you're going to be there for a while. And it's not a good spot to be there. So.
Yeah, you're going to have to get very creative. Yeah, you can't just rent it out.
Find another person that would bite on a deal.
Yeah, take the vision. All right, Ben, man, really appreciate you being a member, being here, sharing your experience, your knowledge. It's amazing, man, to see your growth. So, how do we get a hold of you? How do we, keep in touch with you? How do we find you?
Yeah, absolutely. The easiest way is to email me at rawlandaz@gmail.com. Again, that's rawlandaz@gmail.com. If you guys have questions, please reach out to me. I do also offer some consulting. Like if you have a really big deal you want to deconstruct, or you need some, more tailored one-on-one, attention, get in contact with me through email. I can help set that up. But yeah, and also I am I'm the ambassador over at AZREIA. Mm-hmm. So if you guys see me around the meetings, I'm always wearing my AZREIA t-shirt. Please come over and do say hi. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Awesome. Excellent. All right, Ben. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And I believe another successful AZREIA show. Again, like Ben said, if you see him around AZREIA, which you will, just make sure you go up, speak to him, introduce yourself, let him know what you're doing. That way he can share some of his insights on what he's doing as well. So thank you again, Ben.
Of course. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for listening to the AZREIA Show with your hosts, Marcus Maloney and Mike Prete. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you found this information valuable, head over to AZREIA.org and learn more about our community.